Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to rise today in this House to discuss the importance of the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement, also known as CETA, between Canada and the European Union. I am glad to be able to speak in this House as aspects of it will have major effects on my riding of Souris Moose Mountain, located in southeast Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan has the potential to benefit greatly under CETA. The EU is Saskatchewan's fourth largest export destination and the fourth largest trading partner. With 28 member states, the EU represents 500 million people and an annual economic activity of almost $18 trillion. It is the world's largest economy and also the world's largest importing market for goods. This party strongly supports international trade initiatives that will generate increased economic activity, drive prosperity and job creation, as well as foster greater cooperation between our democratic allies. The Canada-EU trade agreement will emphasize the importance of secure access to international markets through a rules-based trading system. Canada should strive to maximize the benefits we have as a free trading nation, and the need to establish trading relationships beyond North America is exactly what CETA accomplishes. In short, Mr. Speaker, the EU represents a huge market, and having access to that market would significantly and positively impact producers in Saskatchewan, especially within the agriculture industry. Right now, my riding times are tough. The downturn in the oil and gas industry has hit my constituency hard. Thousands of men and women are out of work, and part of the issue is that jobs simply aren't there. This has a trickle-down effect as well. Without the oil and gas workers, small businesses such as restaurants and retail stores are having to close their doors for good, as their customer base is disappearing. Parents are wondering how they are going to feed their families once their employment insurance runs out. It affects all levels of the population and the economy. The announcement of a Liberal carbon tax, as well as the planned phase-out of the coal-fired electricity, has also devastated my constituents, at a time when jobs are already scarce. At this point in time, my constituents are looking for their government to create jobs and get them back to work. Despite the Liberals' lack of action on that front, I am pleased that CETA will provide an opportunity for employment through the opening of markets for several industries, namely agriculture. Once CETA comes into force, 98% of all tariffs between Canada and the EU will immediately be eliminated. The tariff exemption of goods will result in over $1.4 billion being added to Canada's merchandise exports to the EU by 2022. It is hoped that the removal of tariffs and barriers to trade will create jobs that my constituents so badly need, and that it will improve productivity and promote growth. Mr. Speaker, my riding contains hundreds of farms. The agriculture industry is the backbone of my constituency, and I am greatly supportive of any trade deal that will bolster that industry. Farmers feed Canada and the world, and so anything that can be done to increase these farmers' access to international markets should be done. Through CETA, these producers will have an additional 500 million consumers to which they can market their agriculture and agri-food products. For agriculture and agri-food products specifically, almost 94% of the EU tariff lines on Canadian goods will be duty-free once CETA enters into force. As the tariff phase-outs are completed, this will rise to 95% of products, approximately 7 years after the agreement comes into force. This is great news for Saskatchewan producers. From 2013 to 2015, 80% of principal merchandise exports from Saskatchewan to the EU were from the agriculture and agri-food industry, amounting to $935.4 million. With the current EU tariffs on products such as durum wheat are as high as €148 per ton. Once CETA comes into force, tariffs such as this will be eliminated completely. Again, this will create a trickle-down effect, but a positive one. Agriculture producers will not only have access to a large and mature market, but they would also save money when it comes to the elimination of tariffs on their exports. This means that they are able to hire more employees, creating jobs, while also gaining access to the world's largest market. This is exactly what Saskatchewan, and in particular, my constituents need at this time. I am also pleased that CETA will provide Canadian producers with preferential access to markets. As this is the first comprehensive trading deal between the EU and any other country, Saskatchewan farmers and ranchers will be in a position to market their product to the largest economy in the world, products such as beef, pork, and bison. I know that my constituents are supportive of any initiative that opens up markets for trade, and I hope that this government can recognize just how important it is to have this happen as soon as possible. A joint Canada-EU study that supported the launch of the negotiations concluded that a trade agreement with the EU could bring a 20% boost in bilateral trade and a $12 billion annual increase to Canada's economy. This is the economic equivalent of adding $1,000 to the average Canadian family's income, or almost 80,000 new jobs to the Canadian economy. At a time when jobs are scarce in my constituency, this added revenue would make a huge difference in the lives of those who are struggling to find work. By opening new markets, jobs are both directly and indirectly created, something that is badly needed in my riding. The implementation of CETA will also affect a number of other industries, though more indirectly. For example, when a farmer needs to get his grain to market, he has to hire someone to transport that product. This is a job that might otherwise not exist, and so is essentially job creation. Farmers also need to utilize services of maintenance workers for their heavy machinery and equipment. Again, this is job creation. At a time when my riding is in dire need of jobs, CETA allows for easier market access for producers, which allows producers to hire more people, especially in the service industry, and overall benefits the economy of Saskatchewan. While the focus of my speech has so far been mainly on agriculture, the services industry, I just mentioned, will also benefit from CETA's coming into force. The services sector is a key contributor to Saskatchewan's economy, accounting for 57% of the province's total GDP and employing more than 394,000 Saskatchewan residents in 2015. With preferential access and greater transparency in the EU services market, there will be more secure and predictable market access in areas of interest to Saskatchewan, such as construction services, as well as research and development services. Currently, Saskatchewan is recognized as a world leader in agriculture, biotechnology, and life sciences with cutting-edge research centres, spawning high-tech industries. An example of this is the Canadian Light Source Synchrotron and the Innovation Place research parks. Through CETA, Saskatchewan and Canada will have preferential access as well as greater transparency with the EU services market, something that can only stand to benefit our research and development sectors. Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan is a vast province. In addition to agriculture exports of $15.1 billion in 2015, the province is gaining worldwide attention for its wealth of mineral and energy resources. Saskatchewan is Canada's second largest oil-producing province and the third largest natural gas-producing province, making the oil and gas industry one of the largest contributors to the provincial economy with sales of $15.9 billion in 2014. Despite the downturn in oil and gas prices, the industry remains integral to the economic well-being of the province. For those who may not be aware, Saskatchewan is also a world leader in carbon capture and storage, with the expertise in enhanced oil recovery. SaskPower, the province's power utility, has undertaken one of the world's largest carbon capture and storage projects at the Boundary Dam Power Station, located in my hometown of Estevan. This project is one of the first to develop and demonstrate carbon dioxide capture at a coal-fired power generation plant on a commercial scale, in part because of the previous Conservative government funding of $250 million towards the project. I've toured the facility and have seen firsthand how much work is done to developing the initiative. Governments worldwide are sending their representatives to Boundary Dam in order to learn about this technology. In closing, Mr. Speaker, the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement between Canada and Europe is good news. It is good news for our farmers, our manufacturers, our service suppliers, and many other industries. It is pertinent that this deal comes into force as soon as possible. Mr. Speaker, my riding is struggling right now, and many of the provisions contained in CETA could help to alleviate that. We need job creation, and this trade deal has the potential to meet that need. I am proud to support this agreement that would not only help Saskatchewan's varied economy, but also strengthen the relationships between Canada and Europe. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. And I thank my honourable colleague for his speech this morning. We both actually share something in common. We represent ridings that border on the United States. I know from the fish and seafood industry in my riding how thrilled they are and anxious they are about this agreement to be ratified. Every 1 in 4 jobs is related directly to trade, and certainly the services, as my colleague had mentioned, the ripple effect of that. We, as Canadians, the opportunity that we sit geographically, we have the CETA, but we also have NAFTA. So potentially we have the opportunity to be a trading nation within 1 billion population. As a representative of a U.S. border riding like mine, does the honourable member agree CETA will offer Canadian businesses unique opportunities as the springboard to our neighbours to the south? Thank you.
The honourable member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. And truly, in my riding, as hers, I have the southern part of my riding is the U.S. border, and it's half of the province, and it's a huge amount of trade that goes back and forth across that border. And we have a trade corridor that we've established. And so CETA provides that opportunity not only to allow for U.S. trade coming into Canada, with NAFTA coming into Canada, and likewise extending that into Europe. And I see that as a win-win. And for me, as I say, my riding, I tell everyone, my riding, I am an exporter. I export wheat, coal, gas, potash, and for the longest time, we've exported our people. And now we've had them back in our riding, and we want to keep them in that riding. We want to keep them there, and we see this as a win-win. It's creating jobs, and that's what we want to see. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Desnathay, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the member concerned that CETA will lead to increased costs of prescription drugs for Canadians, given the Canadians already pay more for prescription drugs than nearly every other OECD countries?
The honourable member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Thank you, and I thank my colleague for that question. And we expect that this government, when this bill comes into force, will honour the commitments that they've made. And that part we expect. And as we look at issues of pharmaceuticals, we recognize that the patent agreement will stay the same when it deals with Canada and how it is in this country. So.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We heard from the chief negotiators on CETA that the phase-in effect will take place over the course of 10 years. So looking at the cost of pharmaceutical drugs, there is no clear measurement on that. I think as Canadians we should always be concerned about that. But looking at past trade agreements, would my honourable colleague agree with me that we should not be making those rash decisions? We should be working with all of the stakeholders to keep the cost of prescription drugs down, and also not to scare Canadians into something that may not be take into effect. Thank you.
The honourable member for Souris Moose Mountain.
I thank my honourable colleague for her question, and yes, I do. I think it's something we need to continue to work with these organizations and make certain that all the issues are looked at in all the patent issues, et cetera, and that we manage and focus on keeping those costs down throughout Canada.
I think we can squeeze in one more question there. The honourable member for Saskatoon Grasswood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As everyone knows, the province of Saskatchewan is the lone jurisdiction in this country that is against the carbon capture. You mentioned, my colleague, the NAFTA agreement with the United States. Our premier in Saskatchewan has really been worried with the trading agreements, especially in agriculture, where it will be an unbalance, where the Americans have the advantage over us because of the carbon capture. So how will this affect our province with this agreement with CETA, and more importantly, our NAFTA agreement that should be coming up very shortly?
Honourable member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Thank you, and I thank my colleague from Saskatoon Grasswoods for his question. In Saskatchewan, it is a big worry with the implementation of carbon tax and the impact that is going to have on our farming industry. Those costs are going to drive up costs on all things, and not only their fuel, but their equipment, their fertilizer, et cetera. And those costs are going to put us into a position where we're selling our wheat and our canola, et cetera, at higher cost than the U.S. And so this is a big concern for Saskatchewan, and how this carbon tax is going to have a huge impact on our province.